Hello there, people of the internet. This video is going to upset some people. I was asked to make a video talking about guns that shoot multiple calibers. And so, okay, I got no problems with that. Now, if we're talking about calibers, normally whenever people say this gun shoots multiple calibers, they're talking about different kinds of ammunition, but they're going to be the same caliber for the most part. Or at least exceptionally similar to the same caliber. Caliber is the actual diameter of your projectile, but whenever people talk about, say, 50 caliber, or 50 BMG being a 50 caliber and 50 AE being a 50 caliber, whenever you say 50 caliber, normally people think of that 50 BMG because it's like, oh yeah, all great and powerful, but there's other 50s out there that are simply not that powerful. So we're going to go ahead and talk about guns that shoot different cartridges and guns that shoot different calibers, because I feel like it would be an interesting topic. So let's start off with a gun that can shoot different cartridges. If we have a Trapdoor Springfield in 4570, or pretty much any 4570, which I don't see right here, a 4570 is a straight wall cartridge that headspaces on the rim of the cartridge. And that means that the actual brass itself, since it's not cycling through anything like a lever action would or anything like that, the actual brass itself can be any length, in theory. And that brass, as long as it's not extending to the point of pushing the bullet into the rifling itself, you can have like nice, short, light recoiling 4570, like you cut that brass in half and load it with like 40 grains of gunpowder with your projectile on top of it, or some means of something like that, and you have a significantly different cartridge based off the 4570 that can still run in that particular gun. This same philosophy is why you can shoot 38 Special from a 357 Magnum. That 357 Magnum chamber is larger than the 38 Special. But the 38 Special and the 357 Magnum, they headspace on the rim of the cartridge. So as long as the rim is good, then you can have whatever length you want inside of that rifle, as long as it fits inside the chamber of that rifle and doesn't go into the actual rifling itself. So in theory with that, any gun that has a straight wall cartridge that headspaces on the head of the cartridge, like the actual rim on the head of the cartridge, you can load whatever size cartridge it is you want in that. You could have like the tiniest little 38 caliber cartridge inside of your 38 Special, and as long as it is the right diameter of brass, then you're going to be fine. The firearm will be able to shoot that effectively. Now, there's other straight wall cartridges where that's not the case. Like, for example, 9mm, like 9x19. That's a straight wall cartridge for the most part. I think that it's got a very, 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 very minor taper in the case to aid with extraction, but for all intents and purposes, it's a straight wall cartridge. The issue with the 9mm is it headspaces on the very end of the neck of the cartridge. If you look into a 9mm barrel, you'll see a little tiny rim at the end of the chamber that the 9mm case presses up against. And because of that, it doesn't headspace on the rim of the cartridge, and so the 9mm has to be a specific length in order to appropriately fire inside of your particular handgun. Now, there is some caveat to that. I know that there's some people out there who will probably bring up shooting 380 from a 9mm. If your extractor manages to hold your cartridge in place well enough for a firing pin to be able to smack that primer well enough for that cartridge to go off, then you're not going to have any issues. And you also shouldn't have any headspace issues because there's no forward or rearward travel of that cartridge as it is pulled from the chamber. So there is some caveat to something like that, but the cartridge isn't held in with headspace in that case. It's mechanically held in with an extractor, and that's probably something I could make a whole other video about. So 9mm you can actually fire 380 from, and 10mm you can fire 40 Smith & Wesson from, and 45 ACP, I don't think that there's a smaller cartridge that you can fire from 45 ACP. You're just stuck with 45. So those are some examples of being able to shoot different cartridges in these different guns. However, if we start looking at different calibers from different guns, that's where we start to see some interesting deviations. Like, for example, there's revolvers out there that are chambered in .38 and .357, but they have a setup to where you can load 9mm inside of them as well. The 9mm is a slightly different caliber than .357. It's .357 diameter bullets versus .355 diameter bullets. But that diameter, that minor change in the diameter of the bullet isn't enough to make a difference with these handgun cartridges, so it should be able to fire just fine, assuming that the mechanical hold of the 9mm round is able to properly seat that round inside of your .38 special chamber. Now, if we have a look at some other things, like, say, oh, what's a good example? I have a Mosin Nagant right here, chambered in .762 by .54R. This is a .311 diameter projectile, or .312, one of those two numbers, but people regularly load these with .308 diameter bullets. I'm not talking about a .308 cartridge, I'm talking about a .308 caliber projectile, so a slightly smaller caliber projectile than what the gun actually calls for. And they do that because the difference in caliber is not enough for it to really make all that much of a difference for most shooters. If you're shooting for accuracy at really long distances, then you might end up seeing a diminishing accuracy, but for the most part, it's not enough for it to matter to most people, because most people just magged up into garbage anyway. But that's an example of a gun that can shoot two different calibers, the original .311 diameter bullet or down to .308 diameter bullets. Here in the United States, the reason why we would do that is because .308 diameter bullets are extraordinarily available for really cheap amounts of money, as opposed to going out and getting proper, like, 174 grain .311 diameter bullets, you know, to particularly load that particular non-US cartridge. May as well, you know, spend a third of the money on .308 rounds and have a little bit bigger group size. Same thing goes with, like, the .303 British. That's also a .311 diameter bullet. As a matter of fact, I think that the Arisaka, the 7.7 Jap Arisaka rounds are also that same bullet diameter, 311 or 312 or whatever the heck they are. And so you can go ahead and load those with .308 as well. As a matter of fact, there's even factories out there that do something very similar. This is a 6.5 Carcano, however it is you feel like pronouncing the name of this gun, and it has a .268 diameter bore. Now, .268 diameter bullets are extraordinarily rare in comparison to the far more common .264 diameter bullets. And as a result of that, most companies that make 6.5 Carcano ammunition just use the way more common, slightly smaller bullet, and it does diminish accuracy, but it doesn't really diminish accuracy all that much with these guns, to the point to where most people really aren't even going to notice the diminishing in accuracy. So those are some examples of guns that can take two different calibers based off of what is most popular on the market, but the two different calibers are ever so slightly, like they're so minor of a change to the point where you don't really have to worry about it. Now, I have seen Sabot rounds, S-A-B-O-T rounds, loaded up into these rifle cartridges, and it will be, say, a 5.56 55 grain bullet loaded into a .303 with a .30 caliber Sabot that holds it in place. And that Sabot will actually be what engages the rifling and spins the bullet properly, and whenever that bullet leaves the barrel, it leaves that Sabot behind. And that is done to get really high velocities with really small, fast-moving rounds. You go throwing a .223 55 grain bullet that is Sabot'd into a .303 British, you're probably going to send that thing at, oh, I don't know, I'd guess about 4,000 feet per second, which is significantly faster than a normal .223 would fire it. So if we're looking at Sabot rounds, then, I mean, the sky's the limit. You could load whatever caliber with whatever Sabot it is that you want into whatever cartridge it is that you want, and you can get some really effective performance. So on top of that, there's also, I'm sure somebody's going to bring this up, the shotgun adapters. If you have yourself a single-shot shotgun, there's all sorts of different adapters and whatnot that you can get for that shotgun to be able to load multiple kinds of ammunition inside of that thing. More often than not, it's going to be either intermediate cartridge adapters or like pistol caliber adapters, just because of the nature of the shotgun and its lack of being able to handle really, really high pressure things. So you're going to find things like 9mm, 40, 45, I've seen 10mm out there, 22 long rifle, of course, 357, 44 Magnum. There's all sorts of different chamber adapters for your shotgun. And so if you just have one gun, you have your single shot shotgun, and then you go out and get a bunch of adapters for like $20 a piece, then you can go out and get all different kinds of ammunition that you'll be able to fire from your shotgun. You open up your shotgun, you take your adapter, then you put it into your shotgun, and it essentially turns the chamber of your shotgun into a 357 Magnum chamber or a 44 Magnum chamber or whatever caliber adapter it is that you have. I think it's a really, really good way to be able to have all different kinds of means to be able to fire all different kinds of ammunition from one single firearm for not a lot of money. Single shot shotguns are extraordinarily inexpensive, and so are those adapters. So if you're on a budget, that might be something to look into. But here you go. Here is my video on shooting multiple calibers from all sorts of different guns. Now, there's of course the sketchier side of things. Like, I have seen people shoot 30-30 from a Mosin Nagant in 7.62x54R, and they like wrapped it with tape so it wouldn't, so it would like stay adequately inside the chamber well enough to be able to be fired. And I would definitely not recommend doing anything like that. So there's the sketchier things that you could do, but for the most part, the things that I talked about are not sketchy and are even very adequate if that's the route that you decide to go. So, actually, I do want to point this out because I'm sure someone's going to say something about it. The Steyr M95 chambered in 8x50 Steyr, not 8x56, but 8x50 Steyr. You can fire 7.62x54R through this because they actually have the same chamber dimensions. They headspace at the same point. So they're actually identical. The only difference is the actual neck is a little bit shorter on the 8x50 versus 7.62x54R. And the bullet diameter is smaller on the 7.62x54R. So you're going to get really, really abysmal accuracy. We're talking, I think it's a 3.23 diameter bullet that goes through these versus a 3.11 diameter bullet that goes through the 7.62x54R. So it is a significantly smaller bullet and significantly more diminished accuracy, but it is possible to shoot those through these rifles. Alright, I think that's everything that I wanted to cover. I guess I probably should cover, if you have a 220 or a 223 5.56 AR, then you can go out and get a conversion kit for 22 long rifle. Everybody talks about those. Personally, I'm not a fan of them, and I'll probably make a full-on video as to why I'm not a fan of those, but that is definitely something that is possible. Go out and get yourself a conversion kit for your particular 5.56 rifle, and you'll be able to fire a 22 long rifle through it. Is that everything? I think that's everything. That's gonna be everything. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Gary. Shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.